Yeah, but what if we miss something? This is the question that, even for the most successful professionals, is likely to keep you up at night as you get closer and closer towards your retirement transition. You spent decades building your nest egg. You've been disciplined, you've sacrificed, you've put yourself into the position where work is now officially optional. And yet you can't help but have that nagging feeling in the back of your mind. What if we have a blind spot? What if we have missed something that could potentially cost us once we actually go through the process of retiring? And that feeling is far from irrational. In fact, most of the people that we end up sitting down with, we find that their plans are simply not built for the inevitable curveballs that retirement is likely to present to you over the course of a long retirement. For most people, the complexity does not begin when you're saving and accumulating. It really starts when you're actually in the preservation and distribution phase of your life. I've had the opportunity to work with hundreds of families through this transition now over the last 20 years, and I can tell you that the only way to confidently know that your plan is really prepared for all of life's curveballs is to stress test it before you retire. Over these next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through the 3 most common scenarios that are most likely to separate confident retirees from worried retirees. These are the specific stress tests that will help you to identify, will my plan hold up no matter what? And more importantly, I'll show you what to do if your plan does not pass. Let's dive in. Stress test number 1, the longevity test. This is about answering the question, what if I live longer than planned? Most people that we sit down with are prepared for a 25 to 30 year retirement runway. Retire at 65, plan till 90, maybe 95, and call it good. But here's the reality. If you have longevity in your family, if you're currently healthy today, the research tells us that for a healthy 65-year-old couple, you now have a 20% chance of one of you living to age 100 or longer. So we're no longer talking about a 20 to 30 year potential retirement horizon. For a lot of you, we're talking about potentially planning for 30 to 40 years or longer. So the first stress test is relatively simple. You have to be able to answer the question, will my plan make it to 100? Does your income strategy still hold up if you end up having to plan for distributions for 40 years as opposed to 30 years? As we're building out this stress test, we want to make sure that we're thinking about the key factors that are going to be influenced by a longer retirement horizon. Issues like inflation risk, the impact of poor market timing. If you retire into a recessionary environment and the stock market doesn't cooperate, will your plan hold up? If you're watching this video and you're realizing that you're not sure if your plan is currently positioned to help weather these 3 stress tests, I've put together a free resource for you. It's called the Smart Retirement Readiness Assessment, and it is a 32-question comprehensive assessment designed to help you pinpoint any potential blind spots that could cost you in retirement before you actually retire. It only takes about 5 minutes to complete, and you'll walk away with a personalized scorecard designed to help highlight where your plan is currently strongest and where you may want to make some potential adjustments. You can click the link in the description to learn more. Now, here's what's kind of interesting about this. A lot of times when we go through this process, it surprises people in a good way. They end up finding out that once they really take a comprehensive inventory of their income sources and their portfolio assets, they're actually in a position where their fixed income is going to cover the majority of their spending, which reduces the amount of reliance that you have on your portfolio. This means for those folks, they may find that they can actually have the permission to spend more than they realized. But in other cases, it exposes a real gap. And when a significant gap exists, it's going to increase the pressure on your portfolio to be able to provide for any necessary shortfalls. This may mean that the 4% withdrawal rate that you thought was conservative is actually more like a 5 to 5.5% withdrawal rate, which is going to increase what we call excess withdrawal risk. Now you're in potentially dangerous territory. But here's the key. You want to stress test this before you retire. It's a lot easier to make the necessary adjustments when you're still working and have the benefit of a paycheck coming in the door. Now, if your plan does not pass the test, there are 3 important levers that you should consider to help potentially cover the shortfall. Lever number 1, consider working just a little bit longer. The research tells us that for those that are willing to work just 6 months longer, it ends up having the equivalent planning effect of saving an additional 1% per year for the last 10 years of your working life. So the impact to your bottom line when you work just a little bit longer is significant. Lever number 2, delay Social Security, particularly for the primary earner if you're married. This gives you the effect of, number 1, increasing your income floor. It's going to mean less money that you have to ultimately spend from your portfolio. And number 2, it helps to protect you against another major risk, which is lost income when the first spouse passes away. In that scenario, you're going to lose the lesser of the 2 Social Security benefits, which means that By delaying the primary benefit, you're going to reduce the potential gap that the surviving spouse is going to have to contend with. Lever number 3, be willing to adjust your discretionary spending needs, particularly in the early years of retirement. This is about understanding how to build intentional guardrails around your discretionary distributions when markets are good versus when markets are bad. We've demonstrated that by a willingness to be able to reduce discretionary spend in bad markets, it's going to dramatically increase your likelihood of success in your later retirement years. The point here is not perfection, it's about awareness. Stress test number 2, sequence of returns risk. This answers the question, what if I retire into a market downturn? The second scenario that often keeps people up at night is, what if I retire and the market crashes? Imagine for a moment that you've saved $1 million towards retirement. You have an income need that matches the 4% rule. So you're going to spend $40,000 from your $1 million portfolio to help make up any income shortfall that you experience in retirement. Only one problem. You retire and it's fall of 2007. Over the next 18 months, the stock market falls by over 50%. Now, you've made the prudent decisions and managed your investments according to standard rules of thumb, so you now have a 60-40 portfolio, 60% stocks and equities, 40% fixed income bonds. Now, because of that diversification, you were able to soften the blow. That 50% loss that the market experienced, you only took about 30% of that. So your million fell to 700,000. But if you still need $40,000 to satisfy your lifestyle, you're no longer spending 4% from your $1 million. You're now spending over 6% from your $700,000. This is a new risk called excess withdrawal risk, and it is the single biggest contributor to people running out of money in retirement. Again, the challenge here is that if your strategy does not adjust to the dynamics and the math of retirement, you're forced to be put into a position that you've never had to navigate before. Now you're having to sell assets at a depreciated value, so you're getting a lower value on the shares that you're having to sell in order to satisfy your lifestyle spending needs. In the process, once the market inevitably does recover on the other side of this, you now have less shares to be able to participate in that recovery. This can permanently damage your portfolio's ability to sustain itself for 30 years or longer. So how do we stress test for this? We want to evaluate over the history of the stock market what kind of environments are most likely to potentially present themselves and over what kind of time frames. Some stock market losses occur over short windows of 3 to 6 months. Others are more sustained, 12 to 24 months. How would each of those scenarios potentially affect your ability to retire the way that you want? We then help you to evaluate based on your current allocation, your current spending needs, and your current income sources, how would that scenario potentially affect your ability to retire and stay retired the way that you're hoping to? What we often find here is that it's not the crash itself that potentially destroys the plan. It's the crash combined with inflexible withdrawals. If your plan does not pass that test, the solution is time segmentation. We want to build buckets according to the time that you need to potentially spend from each of those respective accounts. You want to build liquidity that's designed to help cover up to 24 months of total expenses. You want reliable income sources in the form of Social Security payments, pensions, and potentially annuities to help ensure guaranteed paychecks that are designed to align with your personal essential income needs. Intermediate assets for years 3 through 10, and a long-term growth allocation that's specifically designed for equities and other positions that can be held for 10 years or longer. This way, if the market does drop, you're never going to be in a position where you're forced to sell assets when they're down in value. You now have runway, and runway equals stability. Stress test number 3 is about addressing spending shocks. This is answering the question, what are the biggest risks that could present themselves that could be most costly to me in retirement? So this one is the wild card. Spending shocks. This is where most retirement plans fall apart. Not because people didn't save enough, but because they did not account for real-life curveballs. I'm talking about things like the new roof that you have to put on, a major healthcare event with significant out-of-pocket costs, supporting an adult child through a difficult time, or caring for an aging parent. These are not rare occurrences. They are statistically likely. And for sure, one of the most costly of these spending shocks is the risk of long-term care. I was recently sitting down with a couple who had just gone through this experience with one of their parents. The wife's mother had gone through an extended long-term care stay for 5 years to the cost of over $400,000. The reason that we initially sat down together was because they did not want their children to have to face the same kind of burden that they had just experienced. But when we stress tested their plan, we found that they had no real strategy to address this specific risk. That is not uncommon. But the fact is, if you're a healthy married couple age 65 and you now have a 20% chance that one of you will live to at least age 100 and a 50-50 chance that one of you is going to make it to 95, there is an increased likelihood that one of you will require care at some point. And that cost is likely to run at $10,000 to $15,000 per month once you actually need that care in the future based on today's current rates. If there's no strategy in place to account for this, that kind of an event can potentially drain a portfolio faster than any market event. So when we're stress testing for spending shocks, we're not trying to predict the exact event. We want to model the impact. What happens if there's a $50,000 expense that's unexpected at age 70? What happens if one of the spouses passes away earlier than expected? What about a major long-term care stay at 85? Do these circumstances force you to over-withdraw? Do they disrupt your income strategy? Does it put your spouse at risk? If the plan doesn't pass the test here, we want to isolate the biggest risks and build appropriate contingencies. For long-term care, this may mean repositioning a portion of the assets into a solution that provides guaranteed benefits in the event that care is needed, but protects your estate in the event that it's not. For general spending shocks, it may mean building a larger liquidity reserve. Not just 3 months worth of expenses, but enough to ensure that no single event could ever potentially derail the success of your plan. The goal here is simple. No singular event should be able to destroy 30 years of planning. So there you have it. These are the 3 most important stress tests that every aspiring retiree has got to run on their plan before they retire. Longevity risk, sequence of returns risk, and spending shock risk. These aren't worst-case fantasies. These are real events that occur for real people. And the difference between retiring with confidence and retiring with worry often comes down to whether or not you've tested your plan against these potential realities before you take the leap. And again, if you're still sitting here wondering if your plan is ready, start by taking the Smart Retirement Assessment. It's free, it's complimentary, and it is ultimately built for you. It's designed to help ensure that you're really thinking through all the most critical planning steps, perhaps some things that you haven't really given the appropriate attention. And if so, it's going to help to highlight those issues so that you know where to concentrate next. If you're interested, you can get free access by clicking the link in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.